Hello everyone, and welcome to this live Austmine webinar. I'm Sheldon Varco, Membership and Communications Manager here at Austmine, and I'm looking forward to hosting you for today's session. This webinar will explore getting the most out of new technology, with a particular emphasis on its application in manufacturing and in mining. I'm joined by Hendrik, owner of Stratflow, who will discuss optimizing the introduction of new technology, reflecting on why technology implementation does not always deliver the results you expect, and how management can remedy this challenge. Hendrik is a management consultant who has worked with Horizon, Qantas, John Holland, CPB, Downer, and Anglo American. He helps his clients achieve breakthrough performance through a systems thinking methodology and has been instrumental in driving productivity and safety of mining, construction, and manufacturing companies. We're very pleased that he can join us here today to share his expertise with us and our members. Following Hendrik's presentation, there will be an opportunity for audience Q&A. You can use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to send your questions over throughout the webinar. Please also note that attendees can upvote on questions that they find most relevant and that they most want answered by our guest speaker. We'll prioritise these when we get to the Q&A part of the session. So without further ado, I'll now hand over to Hendrik to kick things off for us. Thanks, Hendrik.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much for attending this webinar today. The topic of technology is a broad one, and I will only be able to address a few areas today. We will look at internally focused technology to make our businesses more effective and better competitors in the market. And while the emphasis is on manufacturing today, since we're going to look at the fundamental paradigms causing us the issues we have to deal with every day, much of what we will look at is also valid for miners. So if you are a manufacturer thinking of introducing new technology, you know that it's crucial that you get it right. There are enough horror stories on manufacturers that did not and suffered as a result. But how should we go about deciding on and implementing new technology? Today, I want to show a solution that not only will get you the most value out of technology, but will make sure that your business thrives. But first, some time for shameless self-promotion, the part that Sheldon didn't get to. So yes, I'm a trained physicist, coming from a very technical side. And as all physicists do, it took me 40 years to figure out that the most interesting systems are actually people systems. And it was very good for my consulting business today that I figured that out. So I left the corporate world and I started Stratflow to help businesses capitalize on the many opportunities that they miss. Stratflow also helps clients to look at the inherent simplicity in the complicated and pressured environments, and then help them to deliver breakthrough results by focusing their efforts on only a few critical leverage points. Okay, I'm just having a little difficulty here in getting the slides to advance. That's it. So if technology is the answer, what are the problems or the questions that it addresses? In the last few years, manufacturers and miners have placed a renewed focus on digitalization and automation. And many believe that technology will be the silver bullet to solve safety, productivity, profitability problems, as well as increase customer satisfaction. And yet, many initiatives deliver a limited return on investment, and more often than we would like to admit, the impact is negative. So I'm going to show today that, like the difficulty in improving productivity and engaging our people, the limited success we are experiencing from these new technology arises from the paradigms that we are working from. So I intend to show that our beliefs as to what constitutes best practice in business are deep under the surface, like the iceberg, and something we seldom evaluate or think to address. But if we were to address these underlying paradigms, we can access a holistic solution that's extremely powerful. One where we improve not only our technology selection and implementation, but one where we can also solve productivity and employee engagement at the same time. So to be more blunt, if the solution does not address all of these in a holistic fashion, we will not be able to exit the dead end we are finding ourselves in right now. So why is the failure rate of new technology so high? 25% technology projects fail outright, 20 to 25% don't show return on investment, and 50% need massive rework. The official explanation is that managers are responsible. They did not pay sufficient attention, or indirectly, because the cultural resistance was too high and they didn't work on it well enough. So is this fair? Are managers simply not trying hard enough or not skilled enough? Einstein said, we cannot solve our problems at the level of thinking that caused them in the first place. Managers are already overloaded, so doing more of what's been done before, just better, won't do it. We need to find a simpler and an easier way to handle this problem. Unfortunately, this is available, but it requires that we examine our beliefs, what a well-run business looks like. And I'm going to argue today that management does hold the key, but just in a very different way than most of us imagine. Ensuring that we have better planning, communication, scoping, leadership, accountability, that will not make the difference. Implementing new technology is certainly complex. It has many of the characteristics of a wicked problem. And planner Horst Rittel in the 70s already coined the phrase wicked problems for problems that have some of the following characteristics. They're difficult to define and solve, so we're also not sure if the problem is a cause or an effect. If we understand the problem, it's very much the same as solving it. And every time we work on the problem, it changes irreversibly. So we can't step in the same river twice. It's not a great situation to be in, but it could explain the extreme failure rates that we see everywhere. So today, I will start in part one. I will look at the obstacles that can make a technology implementation fail. Part two, we'll look at ERP systems as an example of a technology implementation that added value, but not nearly as much as it promised. We'll also look at why that was. In part three, we deal with a business competitive environment, and we highlight the issues keeping owners and managers awake at night. And then finally, in part four, we will bring all the strands together and put together a checklist for a good solution, and then show a holistic solution, including a case study of its application. So you're welcome to fall asleep now for the first 3 quarters, and then just wake up for the last quarter. That's where the interesting parts are. So let us assume now, and it's a big if, but let's assume that we selected the correct technology and the optimum areas to implement it. So now we need to introduce it. But there are some obstacles in the way, of course. How do we take the company personnel, especially the time-poor managers, who will help with the implementation and will be using the information and making others use the information? How do we take all of them along with us on the journey? If we cannot demonstrate the value of the initiative within a few months, the momentum and the support of already loaded managers and employees will peter out. So we already mentioned that management and culture may be obstacles. One definition of culture, a simple one, is it's the way we do things around here. It is supported by what we measure and what we reward. And there's no doubt that some company cultures are better than others in implementing new ideas. We know that. There are problems with interdepartmental trust, and there's also cooperation issues that frequently surface and that can stop change initiatives dead. But how do we change the culture? Do we initiate a culture change program? Get a psychologist in so that everyone learns to play nice? Do we work on values? Now, these may help, but as a former physicist, I like John Seddon's proposal much more. John said, forget your people. Real leaders act on the system. Real leaders redesign the system so that it meets the demand. And when leaders act on the system, customers cheer, costs fall, and the culture change comes free. And that's a very important part. If we can get that right, we'll have a winner. So we'll shortly go into more detail around these issues. So effective implementation and use of technology can also be blocked by uneven operational flow, stop-start flow of work through the operations. And this sucks all of the resources in, the managerial and other resources, and it leaves very little to deal with new issues as they come up. Another possibility is that the organization is just not agile enough to adjust suddenly to changes in the environment. And we saw some of that happen, I'm sure most of us, during the COVID pandemic. Now, on this page, you can see typical issues as reported by project managers running digitization projects in large organizations. You can read this faster than I can talk about it, but as you read through, you will see that much of it deals with not knowing upfront what the exact nature of the problem is. So we mentioned wicked problems and its characteristics before, and one of them was understanding the problem is similar to solving it. And from reading, we just saw that no one is sure where or what the crucial data is. Every time we attempt to solve the problem, we change its nature. We're not sure if we're dealing with a problem or a symptom. Can't judge how good our solution or our team has performed. That's a big problem. So it should be clear that traditional project change management interventions, where we specify upfront what's required and how we will run the project and get change to happen, have a high probability of failure. Planners in the project design stage are stressed by their inevitable limits of understanding what the new technological system is capable of, and therefore what needs to be adapted in the bigger, complex adaptive system. So, continuing on that, frequently the project overloads the management of the departments involved, such that they resist the implementation or start doing the bare minimum they can get away with. I'm sure most of you have experienced some of this. New technology implementation inevitably involve short-term setbacks, where the operations, the cash flow can get impacted. And if the organization does not have protective capacity in the system, this will inhibit innovation. And the adjustments needed to make the project work will also not happen. So there's resistance to the new way of working that's required, especially if the measurements and the reward systems have not been adjusted. And given all the uncertainty we mentioned, how should we adjust? How do we know how to adjust the measurements and rewards? Is there a better way of doing this? And when we come to automation issues, it's similar but slightly different. For process, well, before we automate, we need to understand our processes. Where are delays occurring? Are there areas where quality is problematic? This includes having the process in question at least documented to a reasonable extent. For the stakeholders, automation will affect most departments around the decisions that they need to make day to day. What training will be required? What does sales have to say? The more stakeholders we have involved, the better the decisions will be. For bottlenecks, if we have a bottleneck in our process or areas where quality defects are introduced, these would be the prime areas to improve delivery to customers. If we have unclear goals, are we just trying to increase the speed of the bottleneck or reduce the lead time? Or are we trying to cope with growing orders? The goal that we specify will make a very big difference to the type of implementation that we do. And then finally, the buy-in. Will those that we involve experience this as a headcount reduction exercise or an opportunity to grow the business? The behavior will be very different, as you can imagine. And finally, if we automate the wrong areas, that's like getting a machine that can do more per unit of running time. It doesn't help the bottom line if it's not a bottleneck area. It just becomes a machine that stands more because it's done the work that's required. So let's take the example of ERP systems. When ERP systems became widely used in the 1990s, there were great hopes that it would revolutionize operations and dramatically increase productivity. It certainly delivered value, but not as much as we hoped. Perhaps we can learn some lessons from this. At that time, companies produced monthly reams of paper with management information. It sometimes needed a wheelbarrow to move this around. ERP systems promised to make information instantaneously available to managers, so that the quality and the speed of decision-making could be dramatically improved. So Eddie Goldratt, the inventor of theory of constraints, posed 4 questions for implementing new technology. And we will use these to evaluate the ERP system and see how to get the most out of it. So let's go through the checklist. Question 1, what is the power of the technology? What is it bringing that wasn't there before? Question 2, what limitation does it diminish? What's the limitation in your management and production and organizational system that it's dealing with and addresses? What rules helped us accommodate the limitations we had without the technology, before we had this new technology? And question 4, what rules should we use now? So, what problem did we have before ERP systems? It was difficult to get information in time to make effective decisions. This information was available, but in other departments and very hard to access, since it was produced in very large printouts, as we said, with a wheelbarrow carrying it through. With a new technology, we can search. That limitation is now removed. But to manage the old system, we had rules that required you make decisions to optimize your department, for which you happen to have information written down, but you had the information. So what should the new rules be? Well, I should make decisions to optimize the performance of the entire operational organization, not just my department. But this transition in rules didn't happen. And I will shortly give an indication of the negative effects this has had on organizations. So this graph is from McKinsey's, and it shows the worldwide mining productivity normalized to 100 in 2004. It compensates for declining grades and deeper mines to give a fair representation. Incidentally, from the late 90s, ERP systems in mining became widespread, with a dramatic reduction in the admin personnel count. So much more information to make good decisions. Why did the productivity not go upwards? Why did it go down? So I'll continue on a detour for the next few minutes, and I'll show you why the old rules, when combined with more data, is so problematic. So Einstein said, we cannot solve our problems at the level of thinking that caused it in the first place. This graph shows the utility of the society of new paradigms as they develop over time. Each age builds on the best of what came before until it hits a blue bubble. In the industrial age, the ideas of companies such as Ford and General Motors set the stage for tremendous economic and productivity growth. The hierarchical organizations and the processes they developed are very well suited to the needs for efficiency and control to manage those. And without that, no organization can survive. So they perfected the allocation of work to departments with clear reporting relationships and accountability, and using planning, budgeting, job specifications, and performance management systems. Consequence of this was that the decision-making responsibility moved from the front line to management and middle management. It solved many of the problems those organizations had, but managers still had difficulty in getting crucial information for good decision-making in time. The information age then arrived, computing power, interconnectivity, cheap, and it allowed us to hard code our mental models into organizational processes and behavior. We believe that our organizations are now caught in the second blue bubble, a place where the old methods are struggling to deal with the aspirations of society and workers, and where the old methods are delivering diminished results. There are new methods available, but it's very difficult to supplant the tried and tested ideas that helped senior managers rise through the ranks. So let us now go through an example. Let us assume you're a production manager. You're responsible for 6 production departments that work in series to deliver specified output. I'm your manager. I come to you and I say, I want you to size those 6 production departments that are under your control, so that they can run at maximum efficiency, and I want them to deliver on average 10 units per hour. How would you size and resource these departments? Well, most people would agree that this chain got in front of you, where each unit can do on average 10, would be the ideal. Because all these departments, when they produce at an average of 10 per hour, they'll be running at 100% efficiency. We can't do much better than that, can we? But industrial processes are variable. An average of 10 mean some 12s and some zeros. That gives us an average 10. So they're not normally distributed. That's the mistake that we often make. So although it goes between 12 and 0 with an average of 10. So scientific fact number 2 is that we have interdependence. And we have to deal with the fact that industrial processes in a chain are interdependent. So if B goes down, upstream departments have to stop, and downstream departments starve. They can't do anything. And if F goes down, it blocks E from producing more, which blocks D, and so on. So if we look at two resources and their combined effect, we see that as green produces less than purple, purple has to stop. When purple produces less than green, instantaneous capacity, green is starved, it can only produce what purple is handing over. So the combined output of these resources is the least of the instantaneous production of both, which is the red line. So now let's add another 4 resources in series to these two. So all the other resources have non-normal production distribution. Our instantaneous output is again the lowest output of any resource at any time. So you can see instead of a 10, we're actually getting 5. But to make it really interesting, sometimes we win the lottery. And by accident, we exceed our production target in the production record. You can see the areas in blue where we won the lotto. So the manager will come in the next day and say, see, you always complain. You don't have enough of this, you don't have enough of that, but you can do it. And then tomorrow, what happens? So when we look at the entire chain, we see that the output is 5. This chain can only deliver 5, although we think it should deliver 10. Imagine that you are in charge of production. The next morning you arrive at work and you're confronted with these numbers for the night shift. Naturally, you call in your leaders and you ask, where's my production? What do you think they'll say? The manager in charge of this chain has got a tremendous problem. Who does he hold responsible for the shortfall in production? Who does he reward for good performance? Where is the bottleneck he should focus his attention on? What will the interdepartmental relationships and the willingness to collaborate be like? What's the likelihood that decision-making will be devolved towards lower levels of the organization? What will be the attitude towards trying innovative new ideas? What will the employee engagement and willingness to contribute new ideas be like? And how much time will this manager have to focus on the future and improvements versus managing day-to-day conflicts? Can you imagine what will happen if we digitize the information from all of these departments under these conditions? We'll have a total overload of data without any useful information. And that's why a very much recurring recommendation in these projects is simplify first, then digitize. And we'll deal with that in more detail later. So the industrial age success was built on managerial genius and holding employees accountable. And you can imagine the pressure on the manager in the previous slide, the pressure to measure and hold employees accountable. And with more data, it's possible to introduce more KPIs. So Boston Consulting Group partner Yves Moreau says, in effect, these KPIs at the operational level are set as if the parts of the business operate in isolation, and if we can measure separately. So we saw that very well demonstrated in our 6 production unit example. People put their energy into what can be measured at the expense of cooperation. So this is what's killing productivity and what makes people suffer at work. People stop cooperating and the trust disappears. Now, as you can imagine, the ERP system has given the accountants a very powerful tool for monitoring what happens in operations. And indirectly, although sometimes directly, the ability to control what happens in operations. And you might think that I'm exaggerating, but I see many cases where operations management is prevented from hiring people, purchasing equipment, materials, purely because it's not in the budget. In fact, the ERP system has built-in checks and balances which have to be overridden by senior manager or the accountant before it will allow deviation from the budget. The accountants, through the ERP system, have effectively captured large operations. And that's why engagement suffers and productivity does not improve, and the agility is lost. So the way ERP systems are implemented and used can often make or break an organization. And the same can happen with other technology implementations. So before we get to a good solution to the problems that we highlighted, we need to look at the business holistically. How is a business set up, and what is it that the business is trying to accomplish? According to Peter Drucker, a business exists to create a customer. All businesses compete to create and keep customers. Those that do it best make more money. So we run businesses to make money now and also into the future, while hopefully adding some value to society. And in order to do this, management needs to manage and balance the three edges of this triangle that you see. More than 80% of their time spent on the hard and the soft edges, managing people day to day, making sure costs are under control. Less than 20% of the time is spent looking forward on the strategy for the business. So under strategy, the executives need to decide things like who will be our customers, who will not be our customers, how will we compete, what technology and skills will we need. And this is crucial because asset replacement life cycles is long and capital intensive. Clients also want to have free, perfect, and now, and that is what we and our competitors strive to achieve. Marketing, sales need to work together. They need to structure offers that appeals to the market and deliver good margin to the company, not only now, but also into the future. On the hard edge, in order to deliver towards free, perfect, and available right now, we try to improve continuously to beat our competitors. We structure operations, engineering, design, and logistics to be efficient, to improve on cost, quality, due date performance, and availability, and to be efficient. And we try to maximize the utilization of all resources and get the most out of our people. And as we said, we do this through measurement and then holding them accountable. And this is what makes human efforts derail, as we've seen before. And then finally, to keep these parts in balance and push for continuous improvement in a world that's rapidly changing, we need our employees to bring their best ideas and energy and to collaborate in the interest of the customer and the organization. And for this, we need trust and cooperation. In other words, we need engaged workers. To make money now and in the future, we need to keep the business ecology triangle balanced. And this is the responsibility of management. But management most organizations are constrained in their ability to do this. In most businesses, the same management team that's fighting the fires, trying to manage the day-to-day operations, that's the team that's responsible for formulating and executing the strategy. And in most businesses, they're also the people that work the most extended hours and have the longest queues of outstanding tasks and decisions. Everyone else is waiting for them. They are the constraints in both operational and strategic value streams. So our insight has been that in trying to satisfy customer needs, many organizations have an excessive focus on cost reduction. Trying to operate with just enough of everything causes stop-start flow, and not only decreases the efficiency and the due date performance and quality, but also overloads managerial span of attention and increases cost. And the dissatisfied clients then overloads the sales department. So we saw in the previous slide that productivity on the hard edge is not doing well. So let's, and also therefore the time to look towards the future is limited. But on the soft edge, where more than ever we need to rely on our employees, employee engagement has fallen off a cliff. Something is clearly wrong, and not just a little. In spite of numerous targeted initiatives across industries, we seem not to have turned this decline around. What makes this even more interesting is that the frontline leaders score the worst on engagement measurements. The managers, the GMs, the execs, and the operator trade levels score significantly better. Why? Well, frontline leaders seem to be the ham in the sandwich. They're trying to balance lots of initiatives, ensure productivity, safety, spend time on the ground, It's just too much for them. There's a very excellent article that was published by Professor Danny Sampson of Melbourne University in 2019. In this, he lists the key strategies for Australian manufacturers to survive in a fast-changing world. You will note that new technology features, but it also includes customer focus, innovation, cultural issues, therefore, and productivity. And that is the important point. New technology is only useful as part of a holistic package. It's crucial, but it cannot stand by itself. So if we want to find a solution to improve the track record from technology implementation, we need it to be a holistic solution. So, and after all that we've discussed so far, we're now setting up the problem, we're finally ready to propose a solution. This is not nearly as difficult as it sounds, although it does require that we adjust our best practice paradigms. StatFlow has more than 20 years of experience in doing exactly this. So what does a good solution look like? If we want to ensure that technology improvements deliver best value, we have to address the issues of cultural and management failure, and which we highlighted in the beginning. The solution should support this by creating an effective change platform and where bottom-up initiatives can launch at low risk. This is the best way for dealing with wicked problems in a fast-changing environment. It should deliver stability in order to free up management and employee attention. And again, we need this in an agile, to be agile in a fast-changing environment. It should simplify processes and guide employees to the critical areas where focus will deliver leveraged results. And finally, it should provide early warning to management and employees of issues that can destabilize the business triangle. So the traditional processes and the hierarchy very well suited to managing for efficiency and control. And without that, of course, no organization can survive. It functions by allocating work to departments with clear reporting relationships and accountability, and using planning, budgeting, job specifications, and performance management systems. The system is efficient, but not suitable for rapid change. Change management slots in well when the goal is clear and the pushback from employees to the new way of working is limited. The tools of the hierarchical structure do not function well in an environment of rapid technological and social change. We are in need of another system running in parallel to deliver the agility that's missing. At StatFlow, they therefore developed a dual operating system, which we call the productivity platform, that delivers this missing functionality, agility actually, without detracting from the benefits of the traditional hierarchy. It fits into the current management system with minimal interference while reducing the overall workload significantly. So the image on your right below shows the relationship between our hierarchical system and the agile network structure we require. On the left is the classical structure, and on the right, networked, ideal for change. So by creating an environment we call the flow room for 30 minutes each day, managers and employees come together from their particular areas and think and act as a network structure, like the one on the right. This deals very well with interdepartmental coordination. And it's interesting to note that for the first month or so, once we implement this meeting, these meetings can take 50 minutes because there are so many crucial issues that come to the surface that have not been dealt with and actually cannot be dealt with within a particular department. It's cross-functional. So as a result of the increased visibility and the success achieved from the activities around this meeting, a new culture develops automatically. It's one typically where dialogue is valued and where decision-making can be safely delegated to the lowest level possible. Provides the platform to change the beliefs, the mental models, the ways of interacting, the planning, and the execution of activities. The silos are connected, and employees and managers become able to coordinate from end to end to achieve what we call superflow in the spirit of calmness. And this creates systems-wide predictability. And it drastically reduces the number of critical indicators, and it enables managers to manage proactively. It introduces stability to the production chain, and it reduces the cognitive load on managers, frees up their time, and helps to focus on the innovation processes. And especially innovation processes where it will have the most immediate returns. That's the crucial point. So this flow room is a place where the heads of departments, middle managers, and selected employees get up-to-date visual information on what's happening to the business as a whole. The color codes identify where attention should be focused and where help from support functions such as HR and maintenance is urgently required. In the flow room, HR, logistics, maintenance become aware of what the business needs, medium term, longer term, and also instantaneously, and it becomes empowered to deliver. The flow room provides the forward view and highlights the patterns of interaction requiring more attention. Just out of interest, studies in software development have found that the speed of work in individual programmers can vary by a factor of 10, from best to worst. In teams, the variation between the slowest and the fastest differs by a factor of 2,000. So getting teams together is much more important than trying to obtain the most skilled workers in every position. The ability to get the team to work together towards the same goal is where the productivity platform delivers value. So remember the slide where we showed you that the output is actually 5, the system cannot deliver 10. So a necessary part of the success of the dual operating system is that we have to make a distinction between the bottlenecks and the non-bottlenecks. And we have to manage them differently. We have to manage for system flow and not for departmental efficiency. So by putting buffers in around the bottleneck department, we decouple the bottleneck from the rest of the production chain. The bottleneck now produces substantially more than before and with less variation. The rules for running the bottleneck is different to those for other departments. Upstream departments use the status of the feeding buffer as a priority system, and downstream it's the status of the space buffer just behind the bottleneck. And in this manner, we drastically simplify the management of the production process, and we free up time and resources. This is the superflow and the spirit of calmness that we talked about. So we now know where we should focus our digitalization and automation efforts. Efforts around improving the running of the bottleneck is where we will get the leverage results. The red resource is the bottleneck with 10 units flowing per hour through it. The other ones with the question marks actually range from 12 to 13 units on average. So we have excess capacity there. It's not 100% utilized, but because of the extra flow we generate, it doesn't matter. The overall production will increase much more than the increase in cost. And this gives us the capability to outperform our competitors on lead time, due date performance, stock holding, using the same resources as we had before. So it's probably best now to illustrate the theory that we've discussed with an example. Early in 2010, the business unit of the company I was working for was about to be closed down after years of declining performance. Our production manager was overloaded, and the MD decided to give it one more try. I was the technical manager. I'd never run operations before, but I had a few ideas from theory of constraint studies, which I just completed. So he asked me if I would give it a try. I would have 2 days on site every month and 6 months before they pulled the plug. And as you can see on the graph there in the middle, the sales have been falling for 5 years in a row. Sales and finance at head office thought the team running the plant was pretty poor and the main cause of the problems. So some well-meaning advice was for me to fire as many as possible to turn things around and save my job. The quoted lead times about 6 to 7 weeks, often as long as 10 on some items. And the customers were desperately unhappy. Their tolerance time was less than half of the typical quoted lead time. So finance believed that by cutting costs, the unit would turn around. The site manager then spent a day every week going through every cost incurred to see if it could be reduced or if higher efficiencies could be achieved. Finance, they supply pressure for lower scrap, which requires fewer changeovers and longer production runs. while sales screened for shorter lead times and shorter runs. The production planner had a nervous breakdown trying to schedule these impossibly conflicting requirements. So this is the classic trap between strategy 1 and strategy 2 from Professor Danny Sampson that we looked at a few slides before. The strategy for the turnaround I had was then to halve the lead time and become reliable in due date performance. This was communicated to all personnel, follow-up meetings we had every week. And the obstacle was that it was time consuming to access the ERP data. There were more than 500 SKUs. We didn't have visibility of instantaneity of all the sales orders, or the load on the operations, or the location of the supply. So the production process was furthermore unstable and was frequently interrupted by emergency orders. So this, along with cost-saving measures, led to insufficient capacity. Step 1 was then to simplify our sales orders and manufacturing processes. Step 2 was to use experts inside the unit to automatically or to automate the ERP data information on the bottlenecks and buffers and to display it in the war room. And this was done using Excel sheets and SQL. And it's worth noting that the information was already available. It was just not where it was needed, when it was needed. So instead of reacting, so it worked very, very well. And it got to the point where instead of reacting to problems and changes in the market, they had days and weeks advance warning of developing issues. And they could act well before having a problem. So now managers could delegate without fear because they knew that they could correct a few issues coming up in time. And the employees could try safe to fail improvement experiments, knowing that there would be time for recovery. Those inside the business unit came up with new ideas and actions to achieve the end result. And I can only say that the culture changed by itself. There was no need to do it. People started volunteering their time and energy because everybody loves being successful. The turnaround process, therefore, was incremental, it was continuous, bottom-up, with progress meetings every month, and it operated from the change platform concept. It was not a change program. Because of the excellent visibility of the parts, the business could align towards a common goal, reduce the lead time and improve the due date performance. And this was the goal towards which the change platform operated. And the results, well, the employee engagement improved tremendously. The planner was a different person, lead times halved, no stockouts occurred, almost no late deliveries, and within 6 months, the margin increased by 20%. 3 years later, sales volume had increased by 70% and the margin by 66%. Okay, well, that is the end. Thank you very much, Sheldon. I'll hand over to you in case there are some questions.
Great, thanks a lot for that, Hendrik. Just had to unmute myself there. Really great presentation there, taking us through those issues at the beginning. Very interesting insights on sector productivity and also employee engagement that you've raised there. And then great bringing it all together at the end, and particularly like your statement about simplify first and then digitize. So thanks a lot for that. We did have a couple of questions come through, but unfortunately we are out of time. So we will get to those in the follow-up to the webinar and be in touch with answers to those questions.
Perfect.
Just also to mention for those in the audience, we do have a follow-up survey that will be prompted at the end of the webinar. So please just take 30 seconds of your time to give us some feedback on those questions as well. Before we go, I'll just draw your attention to the screen, which just shows our upcoming list of webinars. So you can use those links on the screen or go to our events page to register in for our next sessions that are coming up. I'd like to thank Hendrik for his time in speaking with us today and for taking us through that critical information. So thanks a lot for that, Hendrik.
My pleasure.
And thanks to everyone who's tuned in, and we look forward to welcoming you to the next Austmine webinar. Stay safe.
The production planner had a nervous breakdown trying to schedule these impossibly conflicting requirements. So this is the classic trap between strategy 1 and strategy 2 from Professor Danny Samson that we looked at a few slides before. The strategy for the turnaround I had was then to halve the lead time and become reliable in due date performance. So this communicated to all personnel, follow-up meetings we had every week. And the obstacle was that it was time consuming to access the ERP data. There were more than 500 SKUs. We didn't have visibility of instantaneity of all the sales orders, or the load on the operations, or the location of the supply. So the production process was furthermore unstable and was frequently interrupted by emergency orders. So this, along with cost-saving measures, led to insufficient capacity. Step one was then to simplify our sales orders and manufacturing processes. Step two was to use experts inside the unit to automatically, or to automate the ERP data information on the bottlenecks and buffers and to display it in the war room. And this was done using Excel sheets and SQL. And it's worth noting that the information was already available. It was just not where it was needed, when it was needed. So instead of reacting, so it worked very, very well. And it got to the point where instead of reacting to problems and changes in the market, they had days and weeks advance warning of developing issues, and they could act well before having a problem. So now managers could delegate without fear because they knew that they could correct a few issues coming up in time. And the employees could try safe to fail improvement experiments, knowing that there would be time for recovery. Those inside the business unit came up with new ideas and actions to achieve the end result. And I can only say that the culture changed by itself. There was no need to do it. People started volunteering their time and energy because everybody loves being successful. The turnaround process, therefore, was incremental, it was continuous, bottom-up, with progress meetings every month, and it operated from the change platform concept. There was not a change program. Because of the excellent visibility of the parts, the business could align towards a common goal, reduce the lead time and improve the due date performance. And this was the goal towards which the change platform operated. And the results, well, the employee engagement improved tremendously. The planner was a different person, lead times halved, no stockouts occurred, almost no late deliveries. And within 6 months, the margin increased by 20%. 3 years later, sales volume had increased by 70% and the margin by 66%. Okay, well, that is the end. Thank you very much, Sheldon. I'll hand over to you in case there are some questions.
Great, thanks a lot for that, Hendrik. Just had to unmute myself there. Really great presentation there, taking us through those issues at the beginning. Very interesting insights on sector productivity and also employee engagement that you've raised there. And then great bringing it all together at the end, and particularly like your statement about simplify first and then digitize. So thanks a lot for that. We did have a couple of questions come through, but unfortunately we are out of time. So we will get to those in the follow-up to the webinar and be in touch with answers to those questions.
Perfect.
Just also to mention for those in the audience, we do have a follow-up survey that will be prompted at the end of the webinar. So please just take 30 seconds of your time to give us some feedback on those questions as well. Before we go, I'll just draw your attention to the screen, which just shows our upcoming list of webinars. So you can use those links on the screen or go to our events page to register in for our next sessions that are coming up. I'd like to thank Hendrik for his time in speaking with us today and for taking us through that critical information. So thanks a lot for that, Hendrik.
My pleasure.
And thanks to everyone who's tuned in, and we look forward to welcoming you to the next Austmine webinar. Stay safe.